little after 9. Welcome everyone to today's meeting. And we know that the topic is going to be the new shed and ridgeline protection law. And Shauna also passed out before she left.
I'll share with you.
Ordinance. You didn't get one, did you, John? No. We talked about in regards to Chuck, get one?
No, I didn't. Thank you.
Schedule for the remaining meetings and this year. But getting back to one that we've talked about for 3 or 4 months now is on the viewshed ridge line. We have a lot of different thoughts and ideas on how that should be implemented. Some to a large degree of being very thorough on it. Others on where we just need to thought process was we just need to have something that's going to be helpful for the planning and zoning board if they need it in the future on it. I know last time we went through wordsmithing in a sense, and I think that was a big mistake because we didn't get hardly anything accomplished. And in the meantime, Shauna has asked for the input from the committee members. And I don't know what that pertained to because I haven't seen what she received back from everybody, and she did a summary on it that Chuck was looking at. So
When I had asked her, she said she hadn't really gotten much of anything back other than like the wordsmithing type things. So
I got this is regarding this, but I really sense that our committee is changed direction. I went back over the last two the minutes of the last 2 meetings, and in there people are talking about on this issue, whether it's wordsmithing or going down, making sure we get it right. And everybody, it seems, but as I looked at my notes and the minutes, that people were gung ho. We were talking about even having more meetings just to get this done, if that was interest, if that was required. And I'm really confused as a member of which end is up, because we used to have 2 meetings a month when we had important business. This seems like a big deal, this topic, and yet we're having fewer meetings. So I'm kind of confused by that, and I think that from what you're saying, Gary, you want limited conversation and you want to move ahead. So
no, I interrupted for a minute. That's not the case at all. I certainly want the committee to have full input into it. But the degree that we're going to go on that for being a code,
okay,
there seems to be some differences among the members. And as far as getting back to the meetings being held twice a month, originally they were once a month.
right.
We got into some big issues, then we had them twice a month.
Yeah.
And the reason we didn't last time is because people were on vacation or not able to attend. I thought it was only fair that, we have the whole committee if we could. And that's why we had, a big break from the time we had it in August until.
But see, I didn't know that. I mean, I'm waiting for whatever, and I feel like I missed a meeting or something because I didn't know. I felt like this with the spirit of what was I got in the minutes and also my notes. Then I didn't understand why we weren't pushing this. And I mean, I remember back in the days when we used to spend extra time on signs. I remember we did maybe a couple meetings on chickens. Mm-hmm. And now we're into something, of substance. And I almost feel that if I ask questions, I should feel guilty because, I'm holding things up. That maybe we're double parked and we have to move fast. So I'm very confused in terms of our direction. The thing with sending stuff to Shauna, I didn't understand that either, because not everybody was against the wordsmithing. And I assumed that by giving her the information, that would cut the time down, but it would also eliminate discussion, and understanding. So I'm kind of confused because we seem to be going a different direction than we used to, excuse me. So I need some help with where we're at right now, because the way we are operating seems to be different than it used to be. And I feel like I'm getting lost in transition here, trying to figure out, what's going on. So if you could help me with that, I would appreciate it.
Gary,
And before you respond,
yeah,
I want to piggyback on that. I agree with everything Bob has said. In addition to that, I believe 3 of the top 5 action items that were developed with our strategic planning revolve around this particular topic. And I think that the extra time needed and spent to discuss this is well worth the time. I think it's probably more important than talking about a committee for cemeteries. And I have an issue with sending in letters and sending in information when it's put in the meeting minutes and the meeting minutes read like a dictation. And basically it sounds like CYA type of meeting minutes as opposed to a general meeting minutes and a general discussion about the particular topics. So I'm offended by the meeting minutes in particular, but that's a different topic and different discussion. But I echo what Bob has said, and I believe 3 of the top 5 topics that are supposed to be addressed in the strategic plan are directly related to the discussions we're having now.
If I could toss out, and I'm sorry I missed the last meeting, but I did read the notes. And reading between the lines, at least some of us certainly have misgivings about this. And I did sit down with Shauna last week. And we have numerous already on the books, standards, regulations, overlays, and what have you. And this may be heresy, but I think we're getting to a point of over-regulation. Again, it may be heresy, but I think we're trying to fine-tune something that needn't be there, and it will just lead to more hassles for the planning board, lawsuits by folks who feel they're wronged. And as far as the view shed goes, I think that should be either a lake-wide thing, just like our mooring and docking law. That ship's sailed as far as colors of houses or density or ridge lines. I think the RLD is 1.6% of the total area of the town of Canandaigua, and it's probably the most densely populated in terms of residences per acre. And we're going to screw around to fine tune this and tell people what color their house is going to be, how tall it might be. I think we're going to create another monster. We've got plenty of regulations, guidelines, standards on the books already. And right thinking people on the planning board, and if somebody doesn't like the planning board's decisions, they can go to the town board and say, replace those folks. But we're over-regulating, and I just see problems with enforceability, with the legal issue of taking, and maybe that's why we've spent too much time trying to wordsmith something, and in the back of our minds we're saying, what kind of a monster are we perhaps creating? So there's my thought. I think we're over-regulating.
Gary, can I ask, I did miss, I know your last meeting, and so I was a little bit lost, and I've had a couple of people, even in the room here now, talk to me about this issue, and I can't really quite figure out where the committee is as a whole. And if you'll indulge me a quick second, just so I have a better understanding kind of where everybody's at, if we could just do kind of like a straw poll, just by a show of hands, just so I have a better understanding, if you would for me. And nobody's trying to push this. This is about the ordinance committee. If you feel this is appropriate, great. If not, that's okay too. It's not, nobody's trying to ram this through. So I get the sense, so is there anybody, or just by show of hands, support for the draft version the way it's currently written? Is there any? Okay, so there's no support for that. Okay, so let's forget that. Is there support for a, let me break this up separately. Is there support for a view shed protection law?
View shed protection law.
Something pared down, but the view shed. So I see two, three.
On the RLD only, or?
No, just saying in general,
View
just
shed.
view
That
shed.
area marked.
Right,
for
the mark, let's say the purple area, let's just
Yep.
specify, okay,
Some support.
some support, okay. And then how about for the ridge line, for more codifying the ridge line protection? Is there support for that?
Yes.
Well,
So less
wait a
support.
minute.
Well, what's a ridge line? That's the
If you
dilemma.
protect the view shed,
Mhm,
in essence, you're protecting the ridge line.
Perhaps,
Perhaps, but
Perhaps.
I would like to hear an example of where we're now. So if you have some support for the view shed,
mhm.
I believe within the view shed are the ridge lines. So in essence, in my way of thinking, you're almost one and the same.
So let's talk about for a quick second. I'm sorry, Gary, I'm derailing here. I'm just trying to.
No, I think we should,
So, like, let's take, for instance, Jeremy Field's new property that he purchased, a 4025 Middle Cheshire Road, right? That piece of property. Now, there are some, that's not really on the ridge line. The ridge line is up higher. The Whiteful's PDR is technically the ridge line, okay? He's on the other side of the ridge, but if he goes through and clear cuts the entire thing, you could argue that it would be in the view shed. Actually, I think it is listed in the view shed map, and it may be visible in portions of the lake. So that's an example where I would say the view shed may be different than the ridge line.
I'm not sure if I concur, but it depends on how the ordinance is written
Right,
to determine whether your statement
correct,
is accurate.
correct. But that's why I'm just trying to understand kind of where the support is, where the level of interest is.
and where you pick that common viewing area. I mean, that's to me a nightmare, because there's going to be somebody that's going to say, well, I can see it. And I can see sky behind it, so it's a hillside, and instead of a horizon or a hillside, or
I believe, Doug, if I'm not mistaken, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that area that we're talking about, that you're talking about,
Mhm.
it's either in the SCR1 or it is in,
Also, that's the other one. I think I'm right.
and if it's SCR1, that's required a 1 acre lot in order to be developed. Anyway, so in my way of thinking, that falls within my way of thinking.
Yeah, so a portion of it is in the purple shaded area, and a portion of it is.
So they actually, interestingly enough, the ridgeline area actually is not in the purple shaded area on that particular one.
But it is in the SCR1.
But it's the parcel,
The parcel.
the parcel's in the SCR one, yes, yes.
Doug, I like your approach, and I had mentioned, maybe when I went back in the minutes, and I said, wow, did I say that? That we lack right now a shared vision on everything. We
Mhm,
don't have consensus, but there are a lot of things we agree on.
mhm,
So if you start, rather than working on what we don't agree on, we can have this and that. We
mhm.
could go in through the other door and work through all the things we agree upon, and then get closer to where we are. I think, I could be wrong on
It
that.
seems like from just this 10-second little conversation we just had here, I guess a little longer than that, but it seems like there's support for a view shed protection aspect here is what I'm picking up.
Yeah.
Now, the details of what that is, that's to be determined, but it seems like generally there's support for a view shed. And John, if I understand you correctly, you support the ridge line because you think the ridge line
Falls within.
falls in the view shed.
Yes,
Would you support a separate ridge line?
probably not.
Okay.
No, John,
It depends on how that's written, but probably not.
Okay,
Because I think that the view shed is, in my mind, what's important and dictates the ridge line.
John, let me.
And let me just add one more thing. I believe everything we're talking about is what was strategically planned and talked about at the strategic planning committee or meeting that we had.
yeah, let me just, because
And I
you,
believe that 3 of those bullets are linked to this conversation in some way.
so you've referenced that a couple of times here,
Yeah.
just so everybody that in the room has the same information. So there were 5 key points that were identified. Number 1, well, these aren't in no order, it's just there's 5. The first one, encourage continued agriculture use of viable farmland and discourage development of those parcels by directing developers to more appropriate locations within the town, such as the 3 identified growth nodes. So that's the first one. Second one, permanently protect lands with natural resource significance and support recreation on protected lands. Third one, promote housing and development growth within identified growth nodes and discourage development in environmentally sensitive areas. Revise ordinances as needed to achieve this goal. Fourth one, support the development of affordable housing options and affordable transportation options for the local workforce. Fifth one, invest in construction of roads, sidewalks, and bike lanes. And John, I think your comment earlier was like essentially the first 3, you could make an argument
Yes.
relate to.
Yes, relate to this conversation in some form.
And couldn't we say that the SCR as a zoning district is certainly a growth node? And it's designated for,
It's actually,
housing.
wait, it's not.
SCR1?
No, it's not.
it's not an MUO.
No,
it's-
but the 3 designated growth nodes in the comp plan are the 3 MUOs. MUO 1, 2, and 3.
I'm saying zoning
Mhm.
has identified that southern corridor as a area where folks are gonna build homes in 1-acre lots.
So it
And-
provides
and it's-
for the opportunity for that, yes, in 1-acre lots. We could look up the definition of the purpose of the SCR1 zoning, but in the comp plans, the 3 identified growth nodes were the 3 MUOs. That's what that was referring to.
And now I'm gonna put on my developer hat just for a second.
Mhm.
Okay. The SCR1,
Mhm.
in essence, helps manage where housing is going to be.
Absolutely.
And then, I don't know what it's called, SCR2, excuse me. I have to keep my phone on because my wife's worried about an emergency we might have. But and is it SCR2, which requires 2 acres before you develop, or what is that?
No, that's AR2. Yeah.
Thank you. Discourages development even further. So in essence, in SCR1, you're not going to have cluster developments.
Unless it's a conservation
Unless it's
subdivision.
conservation, well,
Yeah.
that's what I think we need to talk about, but it discourages development of single-family homes.
Yes,
It's gonna,
it does.
it's gonna encourage an individual buying an acre of land or more and putting a house up if he wanted to, or if they wanted to, on at least a 1-acre lot.
So look, if I can just share with you, the purpose of the SCR1 zoning district from the code, the purpose of the SCR1 Southern Corridor Residential District is to maintain an open rural character, to protect viable agricultural soils and areas, and to conserve natural resources and lake views. The town seeks to promote orderly, conservation-oriented residential development in this district. Development in this district should create compact and walkable residential neighborhoods while simultaneously producing meaningful open space preservation. Much of this district has public water and/or public sewers. And then it gets in the section of code, it gets into the density and the uses and that sort of stuff. And then we do have that more dense, compact, walkable residential neighborhoods in the SCR1 that is done through conservation subdivision. Now, we just changed that, so it's more restrictive than what it was 6 months ago, but yes.
Which is going to further manage development within that area.
Mhm. Yeah.
But the challenge with the conservation subdivision ordinance as currently written is that it creates cluster housing.
Do you think that's good or bad, or don't?
You know, I think when you get into those types of in the weeds types of conversations,
There's
Tom,
somebody in the waiting room.
I think that's why you have a town planning board.
Can you just call her?
And when it gets to
Yeah, I
the
still
point
have
where
a-
you're in the
Tell her
weeds
we
that
just
far,
did it. She should be on.
then we've got
The guidelines for
Five.
conservation subdivisions.
5 people on the planning board that can work through the weeds.
Like shoreline.
Absolutely.
That's my,
And that's where I'm going at initially. The SCR and the RLD represent about 5.5% of the total area of the town. And I would guess that 50% of the population of the town lives in that area.
so now let's go back to your example. You got an area like Jeremy Fields purchase. And I don't mean to point him out or just use it as an illustration.
I used it.
If the planning board takes a look at that and says, look, it's not impacting the view shed, it's not impacting any ridge lines. It's a great area to put residential units and determine that, I don't care, just use it as a conversation, a half-acre lot is appropriate. Then I rely on the planning board to make that decision. I don't think it should be, in my opinion, I don't think it should be made here at this zoning, at this table, because we're getting into the weeds at that point.
What's it? We've got conservation subdivisions and we've got the zoning regulations for the SCR that already have the guidelines for the planning board.
You would, I couldn't dig it out, Doug, but you had mentioned that if something had been in place at the time, the building, the Morel building on that knob, the latest thing, probably wouldn't have been approved.
Right.
And so.
The conservation subdivision, the new
Right,
one that we're
okay.
referring to.
And so, with the overlap,
Mhm.
some of the things will be taken care of, and with going with what you were saying, Tom, we don't have to get an overkill if we're covered. But, that is stuck in my mind.
I'm gonna ask Terry, that knob and whether that's a hillside or a horizon or whatever. Terry, do you remember? It seems to me that way back when Morel was starting out, didn't the town hire Randall Arndt, who was the god of planning, to look at that?
That was prior to that activity by a number of years.
But at its infancy,
But his discussion was in the town plan in 2003 was, that argument or that presentation, that somebody decided to insert in the 2003 town plan was made in 2001 or 2. Morels, that particular area Bab's talking about, that came before us when I was on the planning board, 2006, 7.
yeah, and that was
I mean, it
phase
4 years.
phase 5, and it was supposed to be a jillion more homes on those things, and the townhomes compacted the area, right?
Yeah,
used.
but also, we negotiated with Morel Brothers for a number of months, got them to move everything to the east, so that they would not be visible above. At that time, it was just like a big berm up there.
Mhm.
We also specified that berm had to be extended to the south further, to further shield the houses would be on the southern end. Their original design was like a racetrack, a big oval.
Mm.
And we said it was really a crappy design, and they agreed to change it. And what they changed it to was finally approved by the planning board, but it was more to the east. It wasn't visible.
From Middle Cheshire, I mean.
Yeah, so, but then as the demographic changed and the single family standalone houses weren't selling, that's when they came in and asked for relief, and we have what we have.
So, John, can I go back? Are you saying? Are you suggesting, like, and I'm just trying to understand, are you suggesting that maybe we look at the SCR1 zoning and have something specific to that versus a separate ridgeline or view shed law?
No,
Okay, so you do support like a view shed protection, like the purple area?
yes.
Okay. How about you, Bob?
Well, originally, I got interested in this because of where I live. And I was talking about views that didn't involve the lake, but just looking in the valley and all that. And when we got into all this, I think you folks persuaded me that that was a bridge too far right now, but that it could be perhaps realized at a later time that we should concentrate more on what's visible from the lake. And that those measurements are a little bit easier than it's too abstract right now, you know, as the view looking down the valley and all that stuff. So that's what really got my interest in the beginning. So it was my best interest to try to close on this and make this happen, and then maybe eventually we could get to the other thing. But I did see the problems with language and point of view, and that's tricky, no doubt
It's
about it.
very tricky.
Now, would the view shed eliminated the building of that property? Because you really can't see the lake from up on Harvest View and stuff like
No.
that.
So interesting enough, I don't think, no, it's not.
No, it's not,
It's not really
Mhm.
in that, it's not in this
Nope.
map, so no.
Right.
no.
Yeah.
There's one little piece right at the very top of the ridge that's in there, but most of that, what we're talking about, that Lakewood Meadows is not in that purple area.
And what has most people have said there is the view from Middle Cheshire, not the view from the lake.
Right.
So
Well, yeah, and
Which-
go ahead.
That's subjective.
So I guess in summary, Doug, you asked me a question. And in summary, I'm concerned. Let me back up a little bit. I think that Canandaigua is a very unique place to live. I think it's a very special place to live. And I think we all feel that. We've all expressed it in one form or another. My concern, quite simply, is whether we're going to have high density development in that purple area. And I prefer not to see it. Now, again, if there's some isolated areas within that purple area that the planning board or others feel it will not be a detriment to the beauty of Canandaigua, I'm okay with it. I'm okay with the planning board making those types of decisions. But I think in general, my feeling is that we ought to discourage high density development in that purple area.
Don't you think, or I throw this out, don't you think economics takes care of that already? It is, if it's a serviced lot with sewer and water in that purple area, the cost of the land is going to dictate what kind of residential development goes there.
Well, I think not.
No?
No.
I'd
I
say-
think that zoning dictates and manages growth.
There's another issue.
So if you allow, and I'm just gonna go, Tom, to some of the zoning areas, some of them allow development on 30,000 acre or 30,000 square foot lots. Some are a little less, some are 20. In my way of thinking of things, that's kind of cluster development. That's kind of high density development. It's more like the Morel developments that we see. I prefer not to see those in the purple area. I think we got enough of those. And I think by virtue of managing that, we're going to be taking care of the ridge lines as well and protecting the ridge lines as well. Now, I don't know what else I can say. That's kind of my summary.
The other part of that, though, is the environmental conservation. And sometimes that makes the townhouses more attractive because there's less, there's more open land, you know, because of that townhouse thing. And you're probably right that the market will decide, but we also have pressures from conservationists about what's best for the land. And that's the other issue that sort of works itself in too.
Yeah, I think once the trees are cut down, they can't, they're not going to regrow. Not in our generation, not in my children's generation either. So
Right.
that's my concern. I think that there are enough currently established lots that might be less than an acre that people can build on and find and you know, that holds true with the RLD as well. And, you know, those are pre-existing conditions as far as I'm concerned. But I think at some point, when we make a conclusion from that point forward, we got to have a certain lot size in that purple area in order to build. And I got to say, I've looked at the zoning map. And the reality is that when I look at this zoning map, which I guess we couldn't overlay over the top of the purple area, but most of it is 1 acre lots minimum regardless.
Or the RLD.
Well, that's it.
Or the RLD.
The existing rules apply, yes.
So,
I think for the most part, that is absolutely
It's
true.
taken care of.
Let me take this, let
Not
me ask
completely, but for the most
Yeah.
part. it is.
let me ask a question, John. So you were talking about discouraging the density in the purple area, essentially,
Yes,
right?
yes.
So, and I know what you're getting at there, like patio homes or townhomes. Let's use a townhouse. Well, let's pick on a townhouse for a second. We can't say you can't build a townhouse in the purple area because that is a single family home. A
Correct.
townhouse is a single family home. So we can't say you can't build single, you know,
That's correct.
but we could say, we could relook at this and just kind of taking this, your thought process and how we could implement that if that's what we're choosing to do. We could actually create a view shed protection overlay
Yes.
in that purple area. And we could say anywhere in that purple area, the minimum lot size is 1 acre
Yes.
and a story.
Yes.
Because that would eliminate the townhomes.
Yes.
So nobody's going to build a townhouse on a 1 acre parcel.
Right.
And I think it does essentially what most of us sitting at this table really want. I mean, if some people want ridgeline protection, I think in essence, we're gonna be protecting the ridgeline. And I don't mind if we get to the point of doing what you just said, that we put additional language in there that says, you know, you gotta be 40 feet away from a ridgeline in order to build a house. I'm okay with that. I think that
Make it a hell of a lot simpler.
makes it a whole lot simpler.
And there's one other consideration that Doug's probably more reminded of. The growth of the community has to do with having housing where you have children. And if you concentrate or lean more towards the townhouses, more than likely you have fewer kids.
Well,
I mean,
Well,
not
I don't think
sure,
that's
but
valid.
there's no doubt about it, that like the Ryan Homes developments, you're talking a lot of kids.
Well, so you got to be careful, Bob. That's where the market is actually changing. On the latest census information, 60% of the population of the town of Canandaigua, 17 and under, lives north of 5 and 20. So north of 5 and 20, that's townhomes, apartments. That's actually, and that's the growth node. That's where we want the
So
development.
we're the Canandaigua school district city, their enrollment's down though.
Their enrollment's down, but for the population 17 and younger, they live north of 5 and 20.
Okay.
And I just piggyback on this conversation just for a second, and I apologize, because I feel like I'm talking too much here, and I apologize for that. But that type of development and managed growth fits into the 5 strategic bullets that we created, because we're forcing high-density development into the areas that have a lot of roads, a lot of public transportation. And if we're going to create more public transportation, as this 5 bullets say we're going to do, we want to manage the development such that the high density areas are easily serviced by the roads and the public transportation and access to the hospitals and access to retail. Those are all kind of consistent with what the strategic plan said we were going to do.
And the
I'll try
sewer
to
and
keep
water.
it shut. My mouth. I apologize.
Yeah, you're right.
But I think on the children too, that 17 and under for the county, can they almost 2,000 less now? I thought I read somewhere than what was in the last census.
Oh, the number's down for sure.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, the
They're
number's
certainly not
down.
Doing the building to some degree, it's, you know, just
Right.
population is that way.
Fertility problem.
Well, but it's a choice that a lot of families are making to live in low maintenance home settings, you know. And that's, you know, what's interesting to me is 3 or 4 years ago, we were talking a lot about building to the millennial generation, right? You remember all those conversations we were having, building to the millennial generation, what the millennial generation wanted, low maintenance lifestyle, easy, and you're talking about millennials, so they're younger than me, but that's the group that's now having kids and that would be in school and everything else, but they were looking for low maintenance lifestyle. What happened was you had the baby boomers that were essentially the 60 plus now, right? The baby boomers were looking for the exact same thing, the low maintenance lifestyle, and they had the disposable income. So they went in a lot of communities all across the country and bought up that low maintenance lifestyle, leaving the millennials to try to compete, even though they didn't have the disposable income. So now what you have happening is more and more communities are building more low maintenance lifestyle because you have the two largest, the millennials and the baby boomers are the two largest population segments. Those are the two highest, the age, the way that they group those. Even more so, I'm a Gen X, or I'm in between. I'm lost somewhere in the shuffle, you know, so that's why you've got so many people. But going back to John's point, that's why we just created Uptown. That's why we've created the form-based code. That's what we're looking for there. The infrastructure is there, the public transportation. Let's do the density there. Again, and the whole intent of doing the density is there so we can protect these other portions of the town, like exactly we're talking about. So to what you guys are saying, though, it really sounds to me like this really could be simplified, Gary. That instead of getting into all the details, if you really want to relook at this as a view shed protection overlay, and you could base it just on lot size, it could really simplify a lot of this.
Well, I think that was the intent to begin with. I know it was certainly mine, not to have it so rigid. It was going to be tough to implement to begin with and give the planning board, and if so be it, the zoning board, more authority, if you will, over the individual development as it came along and not tie their hands. And I think we're all in agreement that, you know, we'd like the roof lines to be below the ridges and stuff like that. And the other thing about it is I was, you know, done a lot of research on it, although it probably doesn't show, but a lot of these places, what they do is they keep them below the ridge lines also for single family development, things like that. So it takes, doesn't create a big problem on the septic system. It creates, so you have to have switchbacks going up to the ridge and stuff like that, that interferes with, you know, it gives more protection to the lake, if you will, because of eliminating that.
Terry, I know this was a very important topic to you. And is this conversation moving in the direction that you're comfortable with?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, good.
I think the more it can be simplified, you know, the overlay thing is a great idea. I think you do that, and you know, I think it probably be a couple pages long. It gives protection all the way around. And as I said, you know, we're trying to encourage growth in the uptown area.
As far as how it's applied, I see it analogous to the shoreline guidelines, the steep slopes. I think the biggest problem we had was what was the defined area, and if we have a map similar to this, that anything that would come before the planning board that's within this area would require the applicant through a burden of proof to show that it would not affect the view shed, and it'd be the discretion of the planning board to determine if in case that's the fact. And I think that it keeps you out all the metrics and all the because it's worked well with shoreline guidelines. I think, in fact, we probably get more landscaping and protection of the shoreline. If we just sort of leave it up to the applicant, he comes in with a plan and we say yes, no, or add some bushes here, add some bushes there, where with the view shed, it would be similar in the sense that, okay, maybe the applicant's got to put a trial balloon up or something to prove that, and that would be something that the planning board would require be done by the applicant at his expense to prove to us that it would not, because I think the prime concern is the view from the lake and the view across the lake. That's, you know, personally, that's what I'm trying to, you know, I think we should be trying to protect. And I think through this this method, as simplified as it is, it keeps us out of the weeds, like you said, John, and it does. I think it does the trick.
So Doug, what would the impact of this be on Jeremy Fields with his
Actually,
plans that he would come up
I'm
with?
glad you asked that, because that's exactly what I was just thinking about. So let's use a real example of what may or may not happen, right? So let's hypothetically pretend this view shed protection overlay is in place with 1 acre minimum lot size. So immediately, if I'm Jeremy Fields and I try to put myself in the developer's shoes and think of, okay, how am I going to work through the hoops, right? So immediately I would say, okay, I'll cluster subdivision anything that's not in the purple area, because then I can get my density in the area that's not in the purple area, even though it's on the same property. So that would be the first thing I would think of. Second thing is, and I guess I would say to if I was in the developer's shoes, I would be thinking, okay, in the area that's in the purple area, you're only going to allow me to have 1 acre lots. Legally, can you do that? Can I challenge that somehow? And what are the ramifications to me as the developer, right, in the purple area? So if you're saying 1 acre lot, so I could do, maybe I could still do 20 houses at 1 acre lots in that purple area. Is that what the town's looking for? I guess I'm just kind of talking out kind of maybe some realistic pieces, just knowing that piece of property a little bit. And then back to Chuck's point, giving the planning board the say, make sure it's not negatively impacting the view shed, but what is it that we need the planning board to look at? I think we need to define that to some aspect. I know you want to give the planning board the flexibility, right? But what is it that the planning board should be looking for?
Same things they've always looked at.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, clear cutting of trees, denuding the hillside, that would be something obviously would be anything of any extreme height, I guess.
So in those things, Chuck, would we say in the overlay that if you're in the purple area, you have to complete the NRI analysis? Because then it would tell you all that?
Yeah, you could do that. Yep. But I don't want to go so far as to make it, like a checklist that
Right.
he says, well, I have all, I'm not encroaching in any of these or not violating any of these checklist items, therefore I'm good.
Right.
Because then we went to say, well, but you really, up here you have, you have an issue that, you've got stands of trees that we'd like to see remain. Going back to the 1 acre minimum, would that preclude conservation subdivisions then?
Right. So that's I guess where I'm poking at here is that's what we're saying is that the 1 acre minimum lot size. And there's a legal question I have about that. But if we're saying a 1 acre minimum lot size in that view shed overlay, that would essentially preclude conservation subdivision.
But that's also a given in the SCR.
SCR1, you're allowed to do it, right?
But you're killing the bunnies to save the squirrels. I mean.
Essentially, yes.
Mhm.
Or is that different, Chuck? This takes it to another level. Conservation subdivision, as I read it, would allow cluster development. But you have to dedicate so much of the acreage to conservation. You can't clear it. You
That's
can't
worth,
cut it.
that's worth
But you're
saving.
still gonna go, let's say you got 50 acre lot, you might end up taking 20 or 25 of those acres and putting houses on it
Mhm.
on 25,000 square foot lots. And the rest of the 25 acres, you wouldn't do anything with. Now this, if what we're talking about now were to be enacted, you would circumvent that. You'd say all development has to be on a 1 acre lot minimum.
In the purple area.
In the
in
purple area.
area.
Right.
Let me ask a question to follow up. We're talking about Jeremy Fields, but is Canandaigua Shores in the purple area?
Yes,
Yes. Parts of
part
it.
of it, yep.
Yeah, it's a
Is
MUO.
the proposed development on the Parish Street extension in the purple area?
Mm,
Those are the only three
No.
developments that I'm aware of.
I don't think Pierce Brook is.
No, it's not.
Okay.
But certainly Canandaigua Shores.
Yeah.
I mean,
The
that's,
highest portion of Canandaigua Shores is, the lowest portion isn't, interestingly enough, it's reversed.
The conservation subdivision, we town board passed recently.
Mhm.
You have to take out any constrained lands and then you take out 40% of the remainder.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So 143 acres that he has, you'd be taking out, about, no, let's say 60, 70 acres, half of that would come out. So then that half remaining, you could do something with.
Does being in the view shed become part of the constrained land? Or is
Maybe
it
it
just
does,
another?
Right, maybe it does. Maybe that's the overlay.
Like, which way are you gonna wind up with more houses?
Right.
Just from what I know of Field and what his MO has been in the past, he's not. I doubt seriously he's looking at building cookie cutter type houses
Right.
like that.
No,
He's gonna look for higher end stuff and
I
maybe multi-acre lots.
Yeah.
And,
I agree with you 100%, Terry. I don't think that's at all what he's doing, but I just thought it was an interesting parcel to
Yeah.
use. That's why I brought it
Good
up
case study.
originally, because it's so big and it crosses over both the purple area and the
Yeah.
non-purple area.
It's a good target.
Yeah.
How many residents have approached you appalled that Jeremy's bought that land and plans to build houses on it? Why hasn't the town bought the land
A lot.
and protected them?
Well, I should say a lot. So, okay, to give you a number, Tom, I would say, because there was a petition, there was any number of different
Yeah, I
things.
mean,
I would
that's-
say, you're probably talking all in, maybe a couple of hundred.
I mean, to me, that's nutty.
Have expressed concern about Jeremy Field's
Yes,
acreage?
yes.
I mean, before he's even put a shovel in the ground, it's the town's responsibility to protect those folks that have bought their little piece of paradise. I know it's heresy, but
Even take it a step further, before he's even submitted a proposal.
well, that's what happened with Everwild. I mean, the biggest crowd I've ever seen show up to protest Everwild before there was even an application, right, Gary? Without any application or information.
Well, there wasn't an application, but there were
Yeah,
designs. that
yeah,
were-
but my
this is
point
what
is,
we let
instead
go.
of letting the process happen, nothing, it was short circuited again by folks that just were determined they didn't want it in their backyard.
Well, I was part of that, and that was the initial, and then when they made the presentations, they not only didn't allay the fears, they primed the pump. That people were less than enthusiastic about their presentation, and that actually worked against them, I think.
So let me ask that. I mean, I want to go back to something Chuck said. This really could be pretty simple and it may achieve the objective is, I think what I'm getting from you guys. If we had a view shed protection overlay, let's just call it the purple area that spells that out. And it says, okay, minimum lot size for the purposes of further subdivision in the view shed protection overlay is 1 acre minimum lot size. A developer and their proposing subdivision would have to do a NRI analysis, and they would have to identify, because we understand the importance of that view shed area to the economy, to the greater good of the Canandaigua Lake, to the natural resource that is the lake, that we're going to label everything in the purple area as constrained lands for the purposes, again, of subdivision. So that when a developer comes in, they now have to basically identify that purple area as constrained lands. That's going to hurt them, but giving the planning board the authority and flexibility to still work with them. So it's almost at that point, truthfully, like the planning board is negotiating, but it gives you flexibility to look at it on a case-by-case basis when you get the application.
So it's only constrained land as far as a conservation subdivision is concerned,
Right.
Not the guy that's got the 1 acre lot that happens to be in the purple area.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, it would preclude conservation subdivisions.
Essentially, or
Yeah.
allow
No,
you
it,
to,
it,
yeah.
it dictates that being
If your
constrained
lot's
land.
entirely in the purple area, your whole lot's
Your-
constrained land,
Your 1 acre lot,
you can build it as a conventional subdivision.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
or if you owned a 1 acre lot in the
Oh,
purple
yeah, if
area,
you own one lot, yeah.
it's just the usual rules apply.
Mhm.
But if you want to do a conservation subdivision, that's constrained land by definition.
It'd be 100% constrained land.
Yeah,
because- Which,
Then we get into
Gets
the
back to what
taking
John's
issue
getting-
there.
There's, yeah, well, we'd have to wordsmith it and we'd have to look at the legal aspect of it for
Yeah,
sure. but-
That's, you could run into that legal taking.
But we're also going to run into that. I know that it's on your list. The ag committee feels very strongly there needs to be an ag overlay district that we've been talking about. And I think somebody could make the same case for that, but we're also trying to protect the natural resources of the town. So yes.
Is there a map for that area similarly?
yeah,
to
they're
this here?
they're using the strategic farmland protection area map right here.
So then what is it? The areas in purple or the areas in green? or-
It's everything inside the red line.
Okay, okay. Well, that's a big combination.
Do they overlap in some way in some areas? don't they?
Well, maybe not very much
Not
though,
much,
not
no,
very
they
much.
Probably where one ends, the other picks up.
It's a lot of area.
And a lot of the farmland in the southern part is really not great farmland. The great stuff is up here, right?
This is like the best, and this is the second best.
Okay, but this is generally if drained and if not steep slope and so on.
So you have an idea?
I have
what,
enough information to work with Shauna, and we can draft something up that really kind of takes us in a different direction, but it really becomes an overlay for the view shed,
But would become part of a zoning district.
Well, essentially an overlay, yes, is. It becomes an overlay district technically is a zoning district. So then it would add this overlay to our zoning so that you would have the base zoning, whatever that is, those rules apply. And then when you're in this overlay, you have the additional burden for whatever the overlay requires.
You think there'd be a legal challenge with a move like this?
I think we can craft the language that we can hopefully minimize, but you can never avoid it completely, obviously. I think we can keep it relatively simple, to be honest.
And you gotta, as you say, you gotta be fair to all parties or else you're opening yourself up to.
Confiscation without compensation, right?
Yeah.
Karen?
Yes.
Just a comment on 4025 Middle Cheshire Road. I'm just a little bit concerned about unintended consequences. If we say that the area in purple cannot be built on, that will force the building back farther into the forested area. So that might result in loss of forest land there, which is not the priority forest for constrained lands. It's just the northern hardwood forest.
And
I don't know what areas that they would be involved in. It'd be further south, I would think, right?
well, a lot of the forested land that you see from Middle Cheshire Road is actually part of the Whitefield's PDR. So it would be the other side of that. But that's exactly why we'd want the planning board to have the flexibility to look at it on a case-by-case basis, where they're able to decide that maybe to save a forested area on a parcel, they have the flexibility to encroach in that and work with the developer. I think the most important thing is giving the planning board the flexibility to work on a case-by-case basis at looking at each parcel.
That answer your question, Robin?
Yes, I just wanted to go back to something that Chuck said at the last meeting, which it made a really big impact on me. And he talked about the role of the planning board. And he said that there was a parcel or there was a development that was occurring that the planning board was not thrilled with what's going on now. And you wished you had the teeth, the regulations, that you would have more control over what happened on that parcel. So I'm definitely in favor of this view shed overlay. I think it would be a really good thing. And I think John was concerned a little bit about too much over-regulation at the last meeting. And it just seems like if you go a little bit more stringent, but give the planning board the opportunity to work with the builder, the developer, the individual homeowner, then that would work out better rather than having not having the teeth when you need it.
And Robin, I think my conversation about the overregulation, I think was similar to what Tom was saying today. I don't want to dictate what color the houses are. I don't want to dictate things of that nature. And that's what, in my opinion, the current ordinance as it's written gets into those types of weeds, and I don't think we need to.
But the other concern is, would you want to see shiny metal roofs when you're looking up into the, area in the view shed? So it seems like it would be a good idea to have it blend in a little bit better with the surrounding area and not be a distraction.
Well, I think the way we're talking about it now, making it an overlay, I think you get into the specifics of the zoning area of the parcel, and you'd be looking at the regulations for that particular zone for each individual property that's being developed. And I
that's
think
one-
that, and I guess I'd rely more on you, Doug, to answer that I believe that the different zoning areas do have a lot of specifics in terms of those types of details already written into them.
Well, they don't regulate roofs per se. The traditional zoning is more like density and use and setbacks.
We do talk about building height in the RO.
Building height, and that's all relative to those types of things, right? But the planning board does have a lot of flexibility to work with the applicant through that process, especially when it impacts, because we have the shoreline guidelines. And I know a lot of times when an applicant, and Tom was classic, I remember many meetings where Tom was like, but if I'm standing on the other side of the lake, put a tree, so.
And
with
don't
the-
paint it white and they
Right.
paint it white.
Yeah, so the view or the shoreline guidelines are there. I think by creating this overlay, we can do things generally like say, the constrained lands apply when it's visible from the lake. Consideration should be given to the shoreline guidelines, those types of things. So the planning board has a little bit more teeth in saying, hey, it's spelled out right here, we got to look at this, but not telling the planning board they have to do it. And then the same thing, I guess I would say, I know that the development that Chuck was referring to, I think the new conservation subdivision regulate, or the new conservation subdivision, the new code that we just did, that has a lot more teeth that it would give the planning board if that application were to come in today than even what you had months ago, now that that's in place. Chuck, is that putting too much on the planning board?
No, I don't think so. I think the biggest issue we had, or I had, was where does it apply? And if we define this as the actual area where if it's in this area, then it gets the fine tooth review. Because, up till now is it viewable? Isn't kind of with shores, is it, certainly it's viewable from the lake, but how do you apply any type of restrictions or concerns or some sort of way to resolve any issues from the lake as far as what it looks like. So I think having a map, a defined area that it would apply would be very helpful.
I brought another idea, just for conversation. I don't know if it has merit or not, but I noticed quite a bit of the purple area north of 5 and 20. I don't know if that has the same level of significance as those areas south of 5 and 20. And do we want to make a delineation there at 5 and 20, or would that be important or not important? I'm just looking at this map and I'm observing that, and I don't know whether that is warranted conversation or not.
It's along the same lines I was getting ready to ask. I'm glad you asked it, John, because I think about, okay, realistically, what do we have happening? So here's 5 and 20 right here, right?
Yeah.
So for instance, Creekview Apartments, right? We're gonna tell them they have to have 1 acre minimum lot size.
Right.
That means that project goes away.
Right.
And there's some others in here. So you've got Old Brookside, part of Old Brookside is in the purple area.
And they've already built on the hillside, so it doesn't matter.
Right. Yeah.
Take a look.
But the only challenge then is, I can also see it working as a positive, right? Canandaigua Shores is a classic example. That north or that uppermost portion is in the purple area there, right? So then the planning board could say, because this is an overlay and the base zoning and the MUO still exists, both, in this area. So you have 3 different zones for this one parcel, zoning districts. But then the planning board could say, okay, cluster your townhomes down closer to the road, doing your single family up higher with those minimum lot sizes of 1 acre, you know, that would work there. My only concern is arbitrarily picking 5 and 20 as a delineation. Yes, it makes a lot of sense. Why is it that we're saying that south of 5 and 20, you have to do this, but north of 5 and 20, you don't? It would just help me understand with that. You know what, I get, yes, and I agree with you, but help me make the legal challenge that may come as a result of that.
Well, I think, you know, as a town, we've determined that the view shed south of or north of 5 and 20 is more developable than the view shed south of 5 and 20. We promote growth north of 5 and 20, but we don't south of 5 and 20. I shouldn't say we don't promote growth.
Right. Yeah.
That's the wrong word. But we promote higher density development north of 5 and 20 than we do south of 5 and 20. And I'm only picking 5 and 20 because it's
It's a good,
It is.
It's a
Which
good-
is the line, yeah.
it's a good line.
Why would that area north? Is it because of the outlet or? Is that viewable from the lake or,
I wouldn't think so.
yeah, wait. Unless the outlet comes into play.
I think you, because I've done kayaking over on the east side of the lake there in that
Yeah.
area, and I think you actually, from that side, you can see up into that section that is County Road 10
Huh,
and back up in there.
okay.
probably, if
Good for
you're further south on the lake, you
Right.
probably see more of it.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Okay.
You expect to see development that way.
Mhm.
Over there, in the middle of the city on the east side, where that block of purple lives, if you extended that into the city,
This area.
that's where the county, the court is, and you can see all that from the
Right.
lake, so.
Yep.
I mean, it actually just stopped because that's our town, that's the city, so
It's almost a ridge.
it is. But I mean, while it's visible, it's, I mean, it's all really all built up too.
And most of it will be grandfathered then, I mean, so the new rule wouldn't apply.
All right, so let me ask you this then. So we can certainly draw, we can have a map that defines the overlay and we can spell out that we can overlay the overlay on this purple map, blah, blah, blah. Do you want to include that area east, on the east side of the lake? If we're going to say 5 and 20 north is not included, the east side of the lake, do you want to include that or just make it the west side of the lake?
No,
No, east.
Keep both?
Oh, yeah.
again, it's supposed to be a growth node. And how are you gonna have growth if you've eliminated 50% of the land?
So let me.
Right. So Tom, did everybody just catch what Tom said? That is
Yeah.
an MUO3, that's a growth node. But if that's included, then it's gonna eliminate a lot of that.
So
And that's where it makes sense to have growth.
So if somebody, everyone's grandfathered up there, okay. If somebody came in and did a tear down of things that were grandfathered, they have to live by the new rule then with the 1 acre. So that would be interesting, because, you know, we run into pre-existing, you know, nonconformities. That's our life in the world of CBA. So that's, people would have to understand if they wanted a big new development. You know, those were the rules of the game. Okay.
Some of that stuff that we're seeing up on the north may not be visible anymore, considering what the city is putting up on the lakeshore.
Yeah, I think we're getting to splitting hairs north of 5 and 20.
So is the
Again.
committee agreeable to what, you know, you proposed here so far? And
The
Doug,
concept
you
that
got a
Doug-
handle on it? And-
Yeah.
And you're satisfied, Chuck? 'Cause
Yeah, I
it's the
think,
committee more than any.
sort of let you guys talk, and then you were coming around my side, so I figured I think we got to that point.
Well, I think that's one of the things that, you know, and probably I'm at fault for it, as Bob indicated earlier, that, you know, trying to push it through, but I really wasn't trying to push it through, because I knew the items that were behind it. And what got this going to begin with is the morale project, where they're talking about building moratoriums, things like that, so we tried to move it through a little faster than maybe we should have, and we did off a lot more than we could handle, I feel, on it, because we tried to make it too rigid and not make it more simplified or basic, if you will, as it is, appears it's going to be now, which makes a lot more sense.
And I think we were focusing on disagreement rather than thinking about agreement, where we could all, you know, agree. And I think it, you know, and Doug started that today. I think that makes it easier too.
Going back to the purple area and a boundary, do we want to impose the overlay on land in the RR3 to the west of, let's say, Route 21? I mean, talk about getting into the weeds.
Actually, Tom, I would, you know, I walked that property, the new Vista project on Friday, which actually officially opens this Friday with the ribbon cutting. I would encourage you all at some point over the next month to go down and take a walk, go up Jones Road. There's a parking area on the left-hand side. You go up and it's a natural surface trail. So there is portions of it that are difficult. And there's portions of it that are steep. But from up at the top of that, I was actually looking down on our 2 new water tanks. And
How'd they get a permit? It's on the hillside.
for the water tanks,
Yeah.
right. So I was actually looking down on the water tanks. You could actually see Geneva from up there. Incredible views. You could actually see a little bit of Seneca Lake from up there. So it's an incredible view shed from up at the top. So I mean, something like, and obviously that's now protected because it's the town and Finger Lakes Land Trust, but that does make a case for that area over on the other side. And it's so unique, protecting those spots.
I'm just thinking of the guy that's got 3 acres with a nice
I
view.
know.
Yeah. You got it in Gorham now.
Yeah.
You look across from the west side.
Well, that's the other thing. How are we gonna get the rest of our lakeside neighbors to care?
Well, you know, Gorham specifically, they complain specifically about the town of Canandaigua, feeling like the town of Canandaigua doesn't do enough to protect because they're looking back across the other way. They feel like they have.
Yeah,
They have a point
we
to
should
a certain
get,
degree.
we should get into enforcement of night sky compliant, dark sky compliancy.
Mhm.
I don't think that we need any motion or anything. Doug, go ahead and.
Yeah, I can work with Sean on it.
Like that. And getting back to the other 3 items, there are 5 items, I guess, that Sean made out the other day. When her and I met, that we knew what we had in the past anyway. That are, you know, on the table, and some of these are, you know, 3 or 4 different people approach things like John saying, and I agree, but there's 3 or 4 people on different committees that approached me on the cemeteries, and I indicated at the time that we would try to get them worked in by the end of the year. And so I won't say any of these are gonna be easy, because when you say that, they find out that you run into more problems than ever with them, so. But this is the, you know, what we've set up for, you know, the rest of the year for the program, and also we certainly will be having the view shed and
We got it.
replays, you know, attached to it also as quickly as we can get them. We could probably work in conjunction. Would you have it done by the 4th of next Monday meeting, regular meeting?
Maybe it should be fairly, I just gotta sit down with it. So there's a couple of things that relate to this that we're also working on that aren't necessarily ordinances or local laws, but we're working on, it's gonna have to come to one of the committees. I was actually thinking planning public works maybe, and then also the town board. is some updates to a conservation program, because there's a lot of conservation related items that are changing. And so I was able on Friday to really put pen to paper and come up with some guidelines for a program that has 7 different avenues on what that might look like in different ways that somebody may be interested in doing conservation on property in the town of Canandaigua. That certainly pertains to this. The Ag Overlay District, the Ag Committee, I know we've talked multiple months about that. That actually ties into that and possibility of transfer development rights and trying to really encourage the protection of our prime farmland in the strategic farmland protection area. So there's some, some of those things relate to each other, even like the view shed that we're talking about kind of sort of relates to that a little bit also in our strategic initiatives for next year. The cemetery one, we currently don't have anything in our town code relative to our cemeteries, which it was shocked me when we started having that conversation. So that is definitely something that's new, because there's nothing even in there to protect the cemeteries, and would hope that somebody would, but we have, I think, 7 cemeteries that we're responsible for in the town of Canandaigua. And then what was the other one there, Gary? There's another one, I think.
No, it's the Ag Overlay and the cemeteries. We had that down. We had
Okay.
it down 2 different.
What's
Would my cemetery be one of them?
Well, so that's what's weird, because so the cemetery code pertains to any cemetery, because legally we're responsible for the cemetery that's on your property because it's an abandoned cemetery. So it pertains to, like, for instance, what they're talking about is prohibiting demonstrations in cemeteries. That's some of that kind of stuff. Forming a cemetery committee to help with planning for the maintenance of the cemeteries and those types of things. So I guess technically, yeah, it would pertain, even though it's on your private property, the town is still responsible for it. So
But if you got a grumpy landowner that says, you can't come on my property.
that's the challenge. And we actually have a cemetery that's landlocked right now too. And that's another challenge. So there's some issues with cemeteries.
Oh, John's is, isn't it? Isn't yours landlocked?
Well, that cemetery is all on his property.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm talking about the one on that road, but then John's, the one on John's is completely on John's property. That's not even a separate parcel or anything. So.
So there's some state regulation that says the town is responsible for any abandoned.
Correct. That's
Cemetery.
100% what it says. It
Yeah.
says an abandoned cemetery becomes the responsibility of the
Okay,
municipality.
and the responsibility is what? To prevent encroachment or to mow the lawn and fix up the headstones?
It's maintenance, and which is very vague, but it does define some specifics relative to maintenance and basically to preserve the cemetery.
How do you define abandoned?
It's actually spelled out in state law that once the association that started the cemetery or the family that started it, once they're no longer in existence, then it's abandoned, essentially.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So with these 5 topics, are we gonna get some information prior to the meeting so we can review it and comment on it? Or are we creating the language?
No, both the ag overlay and the cemetery law, the draft is both done.
Okay.
I've circulated those.
Cemetery one.
Yeah, that's done. I've circulated that with Leaf and the cemetery committee and helped them with that. And then the ag overlay one, I helped with that too.
Okay.
So
Go back to the first one. I thought we just passed the conservation subdivision. What are we amending?
oh, so Barbara Johnson had gone through the county comment. Remember, we had that conversation at the town board meeting, and there were a few
She had some corrections.
comments that she said that we might want to consider because of the county comments, but there was a desire, I would say, of the town board to get something on the books quicker rather than later, sooner rather than later. So they went ahead and adopted it, even though we knew that we may have to go back and look at some tweaks to it.
Big deal or just
No, they were
verbiage?
small. They were small things.
And I mean, it's surprising because all the years I've been involved in the town, that's the most comments I've ever seen a county come back with on
Yeah.
given item. I mean, they had a slew of them, comments that they had on it.
I'm hoping that communication with the county gets a little bit better and that we can get that information quicker. Because the town board has gone ahead and appointed Shauna as our representative to the county planning board. So hopefully that helps with the communication. So.
Are there any other comments, any committee members or anybody else would like to make? Before we adjourn? Or just comment that this is a very productive meeting. And that was one of the reasons I didn't have the meeting earlier, since I was not available, which I'm glad I did now.
The only thing is, if you just could give a shout out, because I was all primed and then didn't know, I was kind of out in limbo. What, we canceled one and then we went to the end of the month, but I had no idea what was going on. So if it's not about privacy or whatever, but just whatever, just to keep the communication going, because I'm saying to myself, some members of the committee know what's going on, but I don't. So I almost felt like I was not part of the group by not
I
knowing what's
thought there was
going
an
on.
email that went out and indicated that.
But just, and all I got was just a meeting canceled and then the reschedule. And that's but I didn't have a rationale for why. That's what I'm saying. It just, boom, it's, there it is. So, it would have been helpful, to me, at least to understand what's going on, because nothing we're doing is adversarial. I feel like I'm part of a team, and I just didn't feel like I was on the team.
No, that wasn't the intention at all. I thought everybody, realized what it was about. I know I talked to John about it, and, I think the others knew about it too, the reason
That's my point.
Yes, you missed it. You were playing too much pickleball.
Yeah,
You probably forgot about it.
exactly.
Okay, well, thanks everybody for coming and, for all the information everybody has had today, and
Are we meeting next Tuesday
that's Monday, isn't it?
or Monday?
Yeah,
whatever the date is?
that's the regular one, yeah, for me, number 4, yeah.
And you want to pick a date for the following meeting?
Yeah, we can do that, because I talked to, Bob DiCarlo, he's going to be coming, he's the chair of the Ag Committee, and I talked to him the last couple, 3 days, and asked him if the 20 or 21st was more, which one was better for him. He said whatever we came up with. So you want to meet on that Wednesday? I think Wednesday's the 20th, isn't it? And or you want to meet on Thursday, the 21st?
There's a finance meeting at 8 AM on Thursday, the 21st.
Okay, let's do it the 20th then. Is that agreeable to everybody?
So next Monday and then October 20th.
20th, yeah. Okay, thanks everybody for coming, and if I don't see you, I'll see you for sure on the 4th. Thanks.